This is Keely Bunker, and what you just saw were the very last moments of her life. Back in September 2019, 20-year-old Keely was simply walking home after what should have been an ordinary night out. But she never made it back. Instead, her body was discovered later, partially hidden beneath branches near a quiet pool at Wigginton Park. This is that case that will make you question everything you thought you knew, and how quickly the people you trust can turn into the very danger you never saw coming. For starters, Keely Bunker was born in the year 1999 in Tamworth, England. From the moment she entered the world, she was surrounded by love. Her parents, Debbie and Christopher Bunker, adored her. She also had 2 younger siblings who she practically helped raise. Keely wasn't just the big sister. She was their protector, their role model, the one who always checked in, always made sure everyone else was okay. Whether it was helping her aunt with her disabled cousin or just being a shoulder for a friend to lean on, Keely was that person. Always. And yes, she was stunning. Keely had long chocolate brown hair, striking brown eyes, and a petite yet strong figure. Her smile was something people remembered, genuine, warm, the kind that made you feel like everything was going to be okay. She often said she wanted to be a mom someday, 3 kids at least. And the way she looked after her siblings and younger cousins, no one doubted she'd be incredible at it. By the time she turned 20 in early September of 2019, Keely had started making big moves. She had just landed an interview for a teaching assistant role at her former primary school. Now, Keely wasn't a party girl in the typical sense, but birthdays are different. She had recently turned 20 on September 7th, and although the celebration didn't happen on the exact day, she and her best friend, Monique, made plans to go out on September 18th, a full week later. Odd timing, sure. It was a Wednesday, and her big job interview was scheduled for the next afternoon. But Keely wanted to celebrate, and who could blame her? The plan was simple: go to a rap concert in Birmingham, then maybe head out dancing afterward. Keely loved music, especially British rap, and one of her favorite artists, H, was performing that night. It felt like the perfect way to close out her birthday week. After the concert ended around 10 o'clock, they weren't ready to call it a night, so they headed to Snobs, a popular nightclub not far from the venue. Once there, they each had about 4 vodka Red Bulls, spread out over a few hours. Monique would later say they weren't drunk, just a little tipsy, still in control, still having fun. At some point during the night, a familiar face joined them, Wesley Street. Keely had known him since they were kids. Monique met him later in high school. The 3 weren't a tight trio, but they were all part of the same circle growing up. Wesley was known to be the kind of guy who could turn up anywhere and blend in. He was laid back, funny, and always seemed ready for a party, and in this clip, you can see him at the Birmingham station on his way to meet the girls. From the outside, nothing looked off. They were just 3 young people out celebrating, dancing, laughing, filming little clips on their phones like everyone else their age. But there was one thing that would come up later. Wesley had been drinking heavily. According to Monique, he was by far the most intoxicated of the 3. He even got so sick during the taxi ride home that they had to pull over so he could vomit. A bystander described him as 9 out of 10 drunk. Not just a little tipsy, wasted. Still, after their night out, the group returned to Monique's place. Keely had left a few things there earlier when she got ready. Monique begged her to stay the night. It was late, about 4 in the morning, and her interview wasn't until 2 in the afternoon. She had plenty of time to sleep in. But Keely was stubborn in the best way. She wanted her bed, her space, her normal routine before something important. She insisted she'd be fine walking home, with Wesley. That was the part that made Monique pause. Keely was tiny, barely 4 feet 11 and around 100 pounds. Wesley was much bigger, and he was hammered. But Keely brushed off the concern. "I've got Wes," she told her friend. "I'll be fine." It was the kind of reassurance you give when you really believe nothing bad can happen, when you believe you're with someone safe. They hugged. Keely and Wesley walked off together. But by the next morning, things started to feel wrong. Monique sent Keely a Snapchat. No response. That was odd. Keely was glued to her phone most days. She sent another message. Still no reply. By the time Keely missed her job interview, the worry turned into panic. This wasn't like her. She was responsible. She was excited about the opportunity. She wouldn't just skip it without a word. Monique reached out to Keely's family. At first, they assumed maybe she had stayed the night after all. Maybe she had overslept, but when they realized she hadn't come home and Monique hadn't seen her since 4 a.m., alarm bells started ringing. Keely was reported missing that same day. The police acted fast. They started tracing her steps, talking to everyone who had seen her last, and at the top of that list was Wesley. After all, he was the last one with her, but when Wesley started answering questions, things got strange, fast. He told police he walked Keely most of the way home, then left her near a phone booth because he felt sick and wanted to get home fast.
You know which way she walked at all?
No. I'm guessing she went there.
Okay.
She was going there.
Which way would she go home normally?
This way.
Back that way? Yeah? Okay. Is that the way you would walk if...
Yeah.
At first that seemed plausible, but then the details started slipping. Did he throw up before getting home? Did he wait for her to enter her house? Did she say anything unusual? Why did his story change each time? And why, when asked for his phone, did he hesitate? Why give the wrong passcode? Meanwhile, Keely's family and friends began searching, on foot, retracing every possible route she could have taken. They moved in teams, scanning side streets, grassy fields, wooded areas, streams, and then, around 9 o'clock that night, everything changed. From deep within one of those search groups, someone screamed. The kind of scream you don't forget. Her uncle had found her. Keely Bunker, just 20 years old, was found dead, lying face down in a shallow stream, hidden under a tangle of branches. And in that single moment, the entire story shattered. Her uncle, Jason Brown, was the one who found her. It was a moment that shattered not just her family, but the entire Tamworth community. Jason, a man who had seen difficult things before, later said the scream he let out was one of the most painful sounds he'd ever made. The crime scene was gut-wrenching. Keely's clothes were disturbed. Her leggings and underwear had been pulled down and caught on her shoes. Her long brown hair was tangled in branches, some of it trailing in the murky stream. Her lower lip was torn, and there were bruises all over her face, forehead, and neck. Later, the autopsy would reveal more than 100 injuries on her body, including deep internal bruising and hemorrhaging around her mouth. The cause of death was clear. Keely had been strangled. There was no evidence of head trauma, no fall, no accident. This wasn't a tragic mistake. This was murder. As the forensic report came in, it confirmed what everyone feared. Keely had been sexually assaulted before she was killed. Toxicology tests showed she had alcohol in her system, but she wasn't drunk. She was actually under the legal limit for driving. Traces of MDMA and marijuana were also found, but the pathologist concluded neither substance contributed to her death. What the evidence did prove was that Keely had not passed out or overdosed. She had been killed by someone she knew, and all eyes were now on Wesley Street. Police brought Wesley in for questioning, not under arrest at first, but as a witness, the last person to see her alive. His story? It started with him saying he walked Keely part of the way home, then left her near a phone booth because he felt too sick to continue. But the police weren't buying it. His attitude was off. He seemed irritated that anyone was even questioning him. At one point, he complained that people were blaming him for Keely's disappearance. He didn't act like someone heartbroken or even confused. He acted like someone inconvenienced. Officers asked to see his phone. Wesley hesitated, then handed it over, but gave them the wrong passcode. That move alone raised serious red flags. When they finally unlocked the phone, The first thing they did was check his Google search history, hoping to find something incriminating. They didn't find a direct smoking gun like how to hide a body, but Wesley's behavior was still suspicious. He told officers he was nervous because he didn't want them laughing at his Google searches. In a moment this serious, where a young woman had just been found dead, that kind of answer felt wildly out of place. Meanwhile, Keely's best friend, Monique, wasn't sitting back either. She was doing her own digging, and when she spoke with Wesley, she noticed something deeply unsettling. His story kept changing. At first, he said he left Keely at the phone booth because he was too drunk and sick to continue walking her home. Then he said he made it all the way to her street. Then he said he threw up at home. Then outside. Then not at all. The smallest details kept shifting. And while alcohol can mess with your memory, these changes didn't feel like honest confusion. They felt like lies being molded to fit whatever evidence he thought the police had. Monique noticed scratches on Wesley's face, marks that hadn't been there the night before when they were out dancing. That, combined with his ever-changing story, was enough to convince her that he wasn't just hiding something. He was lying. The more she pressed, the more defensive he became. He didn't want to talk. He didn't want to answer questions. He didn't want to help find Keely, and now that they had, he didn't want to take responsibility. The police decided to bring him back in, this time for real. Body cam footage shows Wesley growing agitated as officers take him on a drive to retrace the route he claimed to have taken with Keely. He was not under arrest yet, but the pressure was mounting. He acted like a victim, like he was being unfairly targeted. "Why are people blaming me?" he kept asking. Officers remained calm. They explained that they were following protocol, and here's the body cam footage from the moment of his arrest.
Wesley, introduce him to me. Hi. This moment in time, he was arrest for suspicion of murder.
I don't. Because now, when you say you're going to take my phone, now I feel like you're blaming me.
No,
We haven't blamed, mate. We haven't once since we've been sat in this car. I think your dad can vouch. We haven't once blamed you for anything. All we've done.
Then came the CCTV footage. Between 4:28 in the morning and 4:52 in the morning on the night Keely disappeared, Wesley's phone went dark. No GPS activity. But at 4:54 in the morning, it pinged again. This time, at the exact edge of Wigginton Park, the very spot where Keely's body was later found. Around that same time, a figure matching Wesley's description was caught on CCTV sprinting away from the area. He ran until he was completely out of frame. The footage was grainy but damning, and when the police compared it to his GPS data, the timeline was undeniable. Now backed into a corner, Wesley changed his story. He admitted that he and Keely had gone to the park together. He claimed they were messing around, that he gave her a piggyback ride, and she accidentally fell off, hitting her head. He said she went unconscious and that he panicked, that he rubbed her back, tried to wake her up, but she wouldn't move. He said she just went floppy, but there was no blunt force trauma, no head injury. The story was falling apart fast. So he changed it again. This time, he said they had been flirting, that they kissed, that she wanted to have sex with him, that it was all consensual, and during sex, he claimed, he accidentally put his forearm over her neck. He didn't realize she had stopped breathing until she was already gone. He said he panicked and hid the body. That was his new story, accidental death during consensual sex. But Keely's autopsy didn't support that claim. She had scratch marks all over her neck, defensive wounds. She had clearly fought for her life. There was no indication she had agreed to anything, and friends confirmed that Keely never saw Wesley in a romantic way, not even a little. To her, he was like a brother. There was no flirtation, no mutual interest. And that CCTV footage showed Keely brushing him off when he tried to put his arm around her. That wasn't teasing. That was a clear boundary, a no in body language. Still, Wesley kept twisting the narrative. He was desperate to control the story, to paint himself as clumsy, misunderstood. someone who panicked but didn't mean harm. And every time the evidence disproved one version of his tale, he shifted to another. 4 different stories in total, all lies, all designed to keep himself out of prison. But investigators were done playing games. Keely's DNA was found on Wesley's clothing. His jacket was covered in her makeup. His debit card was discovered near her body, likely dropped during the act of hiding it. Everything pointed to him, no one else. Just Wesley, and it became painfully obvious that the man Keely thought would walk her home safely, someone she had known for more than a decade, was the very reason she never made it home at all. In court, prosecutors didn't hold back. They laid it all out, the timeline, the injuries, the lies. They showed the jury how Wesley had gone from party buddy to predator in the span of a few hours. And they didn't believe for a second that it was spontaneous. This wasn't just a drunken mistake. This was about power, about taking advantage of a young woman who trusted him. They argued that when Keely said no, either verbally or with her body language, Wesley didn't stop. He overpowered her, and when she fought back, he killed her. One of the most powerful moments came when the prosecution showed a short clip from the CCTV footage. It was silent, but it spoke volumes. Keely and Wesley were walking side by side. At one point, he put his arm around her, trying to pull her in closer. Keely subtly brushed him off, not dramatically, not angrily, just a clear signal that she wasn't interested. Then she kept walking. It was a small moment, but it showed everything. She wasn't flirting. She wasn't inviting anything. She was just trying to get home. And for Wesley, that rejection may have been enough to tip everything over the edge. Still, Wesley kept pushing his narrative. He told the jury they were playfully flirting, that Keely had started it, that she wanted it, that everything was fine until suddenly it wasn't. He said he didn't mean for her to die. He said it was an accident. But then came the final blow to his credibility, his quote on the stand. "I was just thinking, why me? I didn't mean for this to happen. I was just thinking, how am I in this position?" That line hit like a punch to the gut. The entire courtroom, especially Keely's family, sat in stunned silence. It wasn't grief in his voice. It was self-pity. Wesley wasn't mourning Keely. He was mourning his own downfall. It wasn't about her at all. And when asked if he thought he was selfish, he said, "No. I put her in that pond, and that's something I have to sleep with." No real remorse. No understanding of what he had taken. Thankfully, the jury didn't buy any of it. In July of 2020, after a trial that lasted nearly 4 weeks, Wesley Street was found guilty of rape and murder. The sentence? Life in prison with a minimum of 29 years before he would even be eligible for parole. It was a powerful moment for Keely's family, not because it erased the pain, but because it meant her killer would be held accountable. But the trial didn't stop there. In the days that followed, more women came forward, victims who had been assaulted by Wesley in the past but never reported it. Their ages ranged from 15 to 20 years old. One of them said she had been attacked in 2015 when she was just 16. Another was only 15 when it happened in 2017. A third woman said she was assaulted in 2019, the same year Keely was killed. And sadly, this is a pattern that's all too common in these kinds of cases. One brave victim speaks out, and suddenly the truth spills forward like a dam breaking. These women said they felt guilt, shame, that they thought it was somehow their fault, that they didn't know how to tell anyone. But Keely's case changed something. One survivor said it wasn't until she saw the news about Keely that she finally had the courage to speak up. She said, "After Wesley attacked me, I was scared to tell anyone. But when I heard what happened to Keely, I knew I couldn't stay silent." Another said, "I felt so ashamed, like I had done something wrong. But after seeing Keely's face, I realized it wasn't just me. Keely's family gave their victim impact statements during sentencing. Her mother, Debbie, spoke about the agony of losing her precious and beautiful daughter. She said, "We will never forgive, never forget. Our home is broken. Our lives are shattered. We miss her so much it hurts to breathe." Her father, Christopher, added, "A once happy home is now filled with silence. Her siblings are a shadow of who they used to be. Keely was our light, and now she's gone." The police, too, made a rare public statement. They said, "Her friend trusted him. Keely trusted him. And there's only one person to blame that she didn't make it home: Wesley." But perhaps the most powerful part of Keely's legacy isn't just the justice her case delivered, it's the change it inspired. For years in the UK, there was a disturbing trend. Men accused of killing women during sexual activity would claim it was a case of rough sex gone wrong, that it was consensual, that it was an accident, that the victim wanted it, and too often juries would consider it. Not anymore. In 2021, the UK Parliament passed the Domestic Abuse Act, and part of that law was a direct response to cases like Keely's. The new law clearly states that a person cannot consent to serious harm, especially if it results in death, and in cases where the victim is dead and can't speak for themselves, the accused can no longer hide behind the rough sex defense. Keely's name was mentioned during the debates. Her face appeared in the headlines, pushing lawmakers to act. Her story helped push the change forward. In a way, even in death, Keely continued to protect others, just like she always did. Her family later released a statement to the public. They said, "Keely was the kindest, most beautiful young woman. She was compassionate, loving, funny, always putting others before herself. We will never see her marry. We will never meet her children. Her dreams were stolen, but our love for her will never fade." And that's the part that stays with you. Keely Bunker didn't die in some faraway alley. She wasn't walking with a stranger. She was with someone she had known since she was a child, someone she trusted, and that trust was used against her in the worst way possible. If there's anything we can take from her story, it's this. Sometimes the people we feel safest with are the very ones we need to look out for. And while that's a hard truth to sit with, Keely's case, her life, reminds us why it's important to speak up, to believe survivors, and to push for real change in the justice system. She deserved more than what happened. She deserved more time, more life, more everything. Cases where a woman is attacked just for turning someone down aren't rare, and sadly, this next story proves it. But this one hits differently because it wasn't just the woman who was targeted. Her whole family suffered because she didn't like someone. This is the tragic case of the Rowe family.
I have never heard anything as bad as the Kapunda triple murder. There is simply no comparison.
I mean, like, they were just good people. I just don't understand why someone would do this.
This question haunts us every time a murder leaves the world in shock, and this case is no exception. In fact, it's even more disturbing. In the normally peaceful town of Kapunda, where crime is almost unheard of, something unspeakable happened. And trust me when I say, even the most hardened investigators called this one of the most savage, blood-soaked cases a jury had ever seen. It was so brutal that when the killer was finally caught, the grieving family had just one thing to say.
"I hope he goes to hell. I don't give a shit what happens to him."
So what really happened for them to say this? And could this be a case where a life for a life should be on the table? I'll leave that question for you to answer by the end of this video. In the meantime, let's get to know the victims first. For this case, let's take a step back to the fall of 2010, to a small, tranquil town in South Australia called Kapunda. With a population of just 3,000 people, it sat peacefully near the Light River in the Barossa Valley, a place where the world seemed to move a little slower. Here, in the heart of this quiet town, the Rowe family was living their lives. The head of the family, Andrew Rowe, was born in England in 1965, but when he was just 3 years old, Andrew and his parents packed up and moved to Australia, where they decided to put down roots. They settled in a quiet suburb of Adelaide, and it was there that Andrew grew up. As a kid, he was known for his friendly personality, his great sense of humor, and his love for fishing with his dad. He was the kind of guy you'd want as a neighbor, always smiling and willing to lend a hand. As he got older, Andrew's path crossed with a young woman named Rose. She was a cheerful, vibrant spirit, just a year younger than him. They met while Andrew was studying in Adelaide, and it didn't take long for sparks to fly. Their relationship quickly blossomed into something serious. In 1985, the two of them married in a small ceremony surrounded by close friends and family, just the kind of intimate celebration they both wanted. 2 years later, in 1987, Andrew and Rose welcomed their first child, a son they named Christopher. Their family was complete when, in 1994, they had their second child, a beautiful daughter named Chantel. Life in Kapunda seemed perfect. Andrew and Rose decided to start their own carpet cleaning business, and the business quickly thrived, providing the family with financial stability. By the summer of 2010, Christopher, now 23, had moved out of the family home and was living with his girlfriend just a few blocks away. Meanwhile, 16-year-old Chantel had started working part-time as a waitress at a local roadside cafe, juggling work with school. But life wasn't always smooth sailing. Around this time, Chantel faced a big challenge. She discovered she was pregnant. At such a young age, and with her boyfriend Dylan by her side, she was faced with many obstacles. However, Chantel wasn't one to back down. Despite the hardships, she was determined to give her baby the best life possible. And though she was only 16, she had an unwavering support system. Dylan, her boyfriend, stood by her every step of the way, offering his love and commitment. Her friends, too, were there for her, ready to offer their help and encouragement no matter what. Life in the Rowe family was, for the most part, good. There were challenges, of course, but there was also love, hope, and a sense of family. That is, until the night of November 7th, 2010, the night that would change everything. It was midnight when an intruder broke into the Rowe family home and brutally murdered them in a way so savage it shocked even the most experienced detectives from Adelaide. Inside, the house looked like something straight out of a horror movie. Blood was everywhere, on the floor, walls, curtains, and even the ceiling. But it wasn't until 2 days later that anyone noticed something was terribly wrong. The neighbors, who hadn't seen any movement from the family in days, started peeking through the windows. And what they found was horrifying. The bodies of 45-year-old Andrew and 44-year-old Rose were discovered in the kitchen, horribly disfigured, while Chantel's body was found in her bedroom, torn apart. Each family member had suffered multiple stab wounds and had been dead for days before the police arrived. At the time of the murders, Christopher, the eldest son, was away on vacation with his fiancée in Queensland. When word of the horrific crime started to spread, he heard that dead bodies had been found on the very street where his family lived. In a panic, he rushed to ask anyone he could on Facebook for more details, desperately trying to confirm the terrible news. What made the situation even worse was that he couldn't get in touch with his family. Initially, he was told it wasn't his parents, but soon after, the police confirmed his worst nightmare. They broke the heartbreaking news to him over the phone. When the autopsy results were revealed, it shattered Christopher even more. The total number of stab wounds was staggering, around 112 in total. His father, Andrew, had been stabbed 29 times, his mother, Rose, more than 50 times, and his sister, Chantel, 33 times. The worst part? Chantel had been assaulted before her life was brutally taken, leaving Christopher with an unthinkable amount of grief and loss. But as strange as it sounds, the first person suspected of the crime was Christopher himself, mainly because he was the only surviving family member at the time. However, he was ruled out as a suspect immediately, as he was the first to raise the alarm when he couldn't get in touch with his family. Once he heard the devastating news, he quickly flew back home. His alibi and fingerprints were checked, confirming he was across the continent when the murders occurred. So, who could have been twisted enough to murder 3 adults in such a brutal way? The Rowe family was well liked in their town, with no known enemies. Who would have wanted to harm them? At this point, people were desperate for answers, especially Chantel's friends. Why would someone attack a pregnant teenager? The brutality of the crime was horrifying enough, but then an eerie detail surfaced that made it even more disturbing. By the way, I post true crime and new cases here every day. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, please consider subscribing. It helps a lot. Investigators pieced together that after the murders, the killer had calmly changed into clean clothes and laid down on Chantel's bed. Bloody drag marks near the bed revealed that Chantel had desperately tried to hide, but the killer had dragged her out, refusing to let her escape. Additionally, nothing was stolen. Valuables like phones, a laptop, an expensive camera, and even cash were left untouched in plain sight. This ruled out robbery as a motive. The sheer brutality of the attack also suggested that more than one person might have been involved, as it would have been difficult for a single individual to overpower 3 adults. Alternatively, the perpetrator could have been a physically strong man. Investigators also noticed that the suspect had clumsily attempted to clean the crime scene, wiping away footprints in some areas before abandoning the effort. Bloody shoe prints led to the door, but then suddenly stopped, implying that the killer may have removed his shoes and left in socks to avoid leaving more evidence. Even more chilling, there were no signs of forced entry, meaning the family likely knew the killer and willingly let him inside, or he had found another way to enter. Now, as mentioned earlier, forensic experts confirmed that Chantel had been sexually assaulted before her death, making the crime even more twisted and deeply personal. But the most gut-wrenching revelation was about Rose, the mother. She had been stabbed more than 50 times, far more than Chantel or Andrew. The reason? She had survived the first attack and managed to call for help. But before she could get assistance, the killer realized she was still alive and came back for her, stabbing her repeatedly until she could no longer fight back. With all this being said, the police began to look at every possible suspect, but after confirming that the parents had no enemies or personal issues that could have led to this horrifying crime, they quickly shifted their focus to their 16-year-old daughter, Chantel. Chantel and her boyfriend, Dylan, had been together for a year, and with a baby on the way, they were both still attending the same school. Like Chantel, Dylan was only 16, and at first glance, he didn't seem capable of such a horrific crime. But the police had to be thorough. They needed to question him, check his alibi, and see if he had any idea who might have wanted to hurt Chantel or her family. Dylan was more than willing to cooperate. Heartbroken, he told investigators about his loving relationship with Chantel and how they had even talked about getting married in the future. He was devastated by her death and struggling to process what had happened. At the time of the murders, Dylan was in a nearby city attending his grandfather's anniversary, and his alibi was rock solid. Dozens of witnesses confirmed his whereabouts, officially ruling him out as a suspect. Despite having few solid leads, the police did have one major advantage: the killer's DNA and fingerprints. They had extracted seminal fluid from Chantel's body, which could be the key to identifying the murderer. But when they ran it through their database, there was no match, meaning whoever did this had no prior criminal record. Another chilling detail emerged: the murderer had used knives from the family's own kitchen. This hinted that the attack might not have been planned in advance, but was instead an impulsive act of extreme violence. To make things even harder for investigators, the killer took the murder weapons with him, leaving behind almost no physical evidence. Forensic experts estimated the time of death between midnight and 2 o'clock in the morning. A neighbor later admitted to hearing Rose scream for help twice around 1 o'clock, followed by a loud thud. Unfortunately, they assumed it was just a domestic dispute and didn't call the police. No one reported seeing any strangers near the house that night, and officers carefully combed the area, searching for clues or the missing weapons. Hoping for a breakthrough, the police turned to the public, asking anyone with information to come forward. Tips poured in, but most were either misleading or completely false, making the investigation even more frustrating. Hoping for a breakthrough, police turned to the public, urging anyone with information to come forward. Calls flooded in, but most were dead ends, false leads, wild theories, and outright hoaxes. The frustration grew, but then Dylan shared something that sent chills down investigators' spines. He remembered that on Sunday night, Chantel wasn't feeling well. She had developed a fever and even called her boss to say she'd be missing work. The next morning, at exactly 5 o'clock, Dylan sent her a text to check in. His message was read, but there was no reply. What he didn't know was that by then, Chantel and her parents were already dead. The person who had read his message wasn't her. It was the killer. Then came an even more disturbing twist. Police discovered the murderer had actually tried to respond to Dylan's text, but Chantel's phone was out of credit. It was a failed attempt to fake her being alive. With this eerie revelation, detectives dug deeper, focusing on Chantel's circle and anyone with a potential grudge. That's when they stumbled upon Jason Alexander Downey, a 17-year-old who was close with Dylan but barely knew Chantel. At first, Jason didn't seem like a threat. He was average height, thin, and appeared harmless. Police initially planned to ask him a few questions and move on. But as the interview progressed, his behavior took a strange turn. Instead of answering questions directly, he grew more nervous, raising the detective's suspicions. He complained about not being invited to Chantel's party and pointed out that everyone else had a partner, even though it wasn't relevant to the case. Then, he suddenly claimed to have an alibi for the night of the murders, a statement no one had even asked for. This erratic behavior only intensified the police's suspicions, prompting them to take his fingerprints and DNA. To their surprise, Jason cooperated calmly, showing little anxiety, something that made them briefly question if their suspicions were wrong. But the truth came out when experts examined his fingerprints. They noticed fresh, deep cuts on Jason's palms, and though he claimed they were from a machine shop accident, the cuts looked too clean and precise, as if made by something sharp. But then, the smoking gun emerged. The fingerprints found on Chantel's bedroom door matched Jason's, and within just 2 days, the DNA results confirmed what everyone had been dreading. Jason Downey was responsible for the brutal murders. Contrary to what police first assumed, that the killer had to be big and strong to take down 3 adults, Jason was actually thin and looked completely harmless. A chilling reminder that you should never judge a book by its cover. He even managed to deceive many people, even those closest to him. When the family's relatives and friends gathered to pay their respects, Jason was seen on local news laying flowers for the family, looking every bit the part of a grieving friend. Born in Kilmarnock, Scotland, Jason had moved to Kapunda with his mother and older brother Jamie. On the surface, his background seemed normal enough, but beneath it all, there was a dark side to Jason that only he and Chantel truly knew. As it turns out, Chantel had always been polite to Jason, but their connection was nothing special. She didn't dislike him, but she didn't really like him either. He was just part of the group, someone she tolerated out of necessity. The thing was, Jason didn't take rejection well. She had turned down his advances multiple times, but instead of accepting it, Jason's feelings began to morph into something darker, more dangerous. And when he found out that Chantel was pregnant with Dylan's baby, it was like a switch flipped in his mind. The thought of his friend, Dylan, being the father, not him, sent Jason into a jealousy-fueled rage. That rage came to a head on the night of November 7th. But there's a dark twist to his reasoning. Jason wasn't just angry at Dylan. It wasn't even about him as much as it was about Chantel. The jealousy and obsession had reached a boiling point, and the night would mark the beginning of something tragic. When Jason was first questioned about the murders after his arrest, his calm demeanor shocked the detectives. He denied everything with unsettling ease, trying to talk his way out of the evidence piling up against him. He claimed that his fingerprints at the Rowe family home weren't from the night of the murders, but from a visit a month and a half earlier. A simple slip-up, right? Except when the police dug deeper, they found that his DNA was on Chantel's body. Jason tried to play it off, making up an outlandish story that during that same visit, he and Chantel had been intimate. But here's where his lies fell apart: the forensic evidence. It proved that the DNA found on Chantel couldn't have stayed on her body for that long. It was impossible. That lie was just another nail in his coffin. Jason's confession revealed a disturbing series of events that painted a chilling picture of the night. After a heated argument with his mother and stepfather, Jason decided to sleep in his car. But that's when things took a turn. He found out from Dylan that Chantel was home, sick. And suddenly, Jason's obsession hit a whole new level. What started as a plan to simply drive by and glance at her house morphed into something far more sinister. So, Jason parked his car at the end of the street, out of sight, and walked toward the Rowe family home. The house was dark, the windows all closed. But there was one window, the bathroom window, slightly ajar. Being the thin, nimble guy he was, Jason squeezed right through it without hesitation. Once inside, he sat quietly in the bathroom for about 30 minutes, just listening, waiting for the house to settle, ensuring that everyone was asleep. Now, Jason claims his initial plan was to confess his feelings to Chantel, but let's be real. Why would he grab a kitchen knife before entering her room? Investigators knew right away this wasn't just some awkward confession. Jason had far darker intentions. Police believed that he was going to threaten her, to control her in the twisted way his obsession demanded. When he finally entered Chantel's room, she resisted his advances. And that's when everything snapped. Her rejection triggered a violent fury in him, and in that moment, Jason didn't hold back. He brutally stabbed her over and over. The screams from Chantel woke her parents, Andrew and Rose, who rushed to protect their daughter. But Jason, now fully consumed by rage, turned on them as well, stabbing both Andrew and Rose to death in a frenzy. In his confession, Jason claimed he acted out of an uncontrollable passion, but the cold, calculated nature of his actions painted a different picture. This whole picture suggested premeditation rather than a spur-of-the-moment crime. As the investigation progressed, more damning evidence surfaced, further tightening the noose around Jason. A pair of blood-stained shoes were discovered discarded in a deserted area. The blood on them matched the DNA of all three victims, and the prints from the soles matched the bloody footprints found at the crime scene. Inside the shoes, traces of Jason's sweat were also found, implicating him even further. Despite his attempts to cooperate, like promising to show investigators where he had disposed of the knives, the murder weapons were never recovered. This led detectives to believe that Jason was still trying to manipulate the situation, even as the evidence piled up against him. The trial of Jason Downey finally came in the fall of 2011, nearly a year after the murders. Throughout the trial, he remained cold and emotionless, frequently changing his testimony and showing no remorse for his actions. He continued to claim he had no memory of killing the Rowe family, even though his actions told a much darker story. One chilling detail that emerged during the trial was that after the massacre, Jason took Chantel's pendant and chain, a piece of her he kept even after her death. During the trial, Jason even argued that the tragedy could have been avoided if Chantel had simply invited him to the party she had hosted before her death. It was clear, though, that his deep feelings of rejection and obsession with her had pushed him to commit this unspeakable act. Throughout the proceedings, Jason maintained a calm, indifferent demeanor. When he finally pleaded guilty, it was an attempt to secure a lighter sentence. He later admitted to his brother that this was his reasoning, to avoid life imprisonment without the possibility of parole.
Hateful things went through your mind.
Downey refusing to even glance their way.
I just don't think he shows any remorse for what he's done.
Even police stunned at the sheer savagery of the crime and the killer's attitude since.
His guilty plea shouldn't be seen as any sign of remorse on his part for 3 murders that I think are unrivalled in their cruel and savage nature.
On April 19, 2012, Jason Downey was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 35 years. Had he not pleaded guilty, he would have had to serve at least 45 years before even being eligible for parole. He even wrote a letter addressed to Chantel's family and friends, stating he was sorry and that he deserved whatever punishment came his way. But when you take a closer look at Jason's letter, it's hard to ignore the sense that there's no genuine remorse behind his words. It almost feels like a forced apology, like a boy who was made to write it rather than someone who truly regrets his actions. Chantel's brother, Christopher Rowe, who tragically lost his entire family, expressed that while he believed the sentence was just, no punishment could ever heal the pain of losing his loved ones. To honor their memory, Christopher had their names tattooed on his body, a permanent tribute to the family he lost. In one interview, Christopher couldn't even bring himself to speak directly to the press, so he let his cousin speak on his behalf.
The lives of my dad, mum and sister were viciously taken by someone of sound mind. Qualifies this bastard, Jason Downey, to only 35 years of non-parole, whilst my family and I continue to serve life. Please explain to me the justice in this.
Christopher, is there anything you'd like to say at all?
That's all, thanks.
After the tragedy, he took 6 months off work and left Kapunda, retreating from the world. When he returned, he could barely keep interest in his work. However, he eventually took over his dad's carpet cleaning business, changing the name from First Choice Carpet Cleaning to Rose Choice Carpet Cleaning, a way to keep his family's legacy alive while rebuilding his own life. As for Jason, he remains at the Moorland Juvenile Detention Center in South Australia, still serving his sentence. Now, I want to pose this question. Was the sentence fair? Should Jason's punishment have been even harsher? Or do you think life in prison, knowing he could have the chance for parole in 35 years, is the most fitting way for him to spend his days, living with the constant weight of his actions? What do you think? Comment down below. If you like the way we create these videos and you want to help bring more cases like this to light, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives. Thank you once again for watching.